Shrug family, this week on Barbell Shrugged, Dr. Mike Lane is coming into the program. He is a professor in a real college, a place that, let's just say, I may or may not have attended all the classes I was supposed to. But if Mike Lane was my professor, I probably would have gone more. It would have been more exciting. We would have talked about meathead things that I like talking about instead of all those business classes. So boring. Friends, he's also one of our coaches, most importantly, most cool at Rapid Health Optimization. Today, we are going to be talking about managing stress loads and performance for tactical athletes. And Dr. Lane has actually works with a lot of our pro athletes that are in combat sports. So aligning the skill set of tactical athletes and the physicality of their jobs with also things like professional boxers aligns very well. As always, friends, make sure you get over to rapidhealthreport.com. That is where you can learn more about all the lab, lifestyle, performance, analysis, testing, and program design that we are going to be doing for you. If you want to join us inside Rapid Health Optimization, you can schedule a call. Just get over to rapidhealthreport.com. Friends, let's get into the show. Welcome to Barbell Shrugged. I'm Anders Warner, Doug Larson, Coach Travis Mesh, Dr. Mike Lane. If you guys don't know who he is the one that manages all of our boxers with Coach Travis Mash, getting ready to get people to knock other people out.
So we hope so. We got a bunch
Brought
about
in
to
the
fight.
speed and the power people. Today, though, we're going to be talking about tactical athletes. And you, pre-show, and you just gave a talk at NSCA in Kentucky, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Spoke about...
And a fun word that I would like you to define to kick this thing off. First, give your little background on yourself, but load carriage. That's what your talk was about, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, talked about load carriage and tactical populations.
Look at that. Take it away.
Hi, I'm Mike Lane. I did my undergrad in biology and a minor in chemistry because I didn't know exercise science existed at that point, but was initially working as an undergraduate intern and then graduate intern in strength conditioning and really fell in love with the entire profession of strength conditioning. Worked under a lot of great strength coaches. They were kind enough to help me get a master's in, or to allow me to get a graduate assistantship where I worked as a strength coach at St. Louis University, got my master's in nutrition because they didn't have exercise science as a master's program. And then from there, I kept continuing to fail upwards and did my PhD at the University of Kansas under Andy Fry, where we did a lot more sports phys.
Wow.
And it wasn't until I came here, where I'm at Eastern Kentucky, that I was able to get into working with tactical populations. So in my capacity here, we've literally been writing the training program for the morning PT for the ROTC cadets, as well as, helping a little bit with their testing, like doing body composition and long-term tracking, as well as we're doing some cadet tracking because we have what's known as the Department of Criminal Justice Training Center. That is like 200 yards that way, where every single cop in the state of Kentucky outside of Lexington PD, Louisville PD, and Highway Patrol all come in for their training. And so that's kind of led me into this kind of load carriage. I don't know if we call it a rabbit hole, but just a really interesting facet of what is combat phys. So to contextualize that, exercise physiology is exactly that, how the body is reacting to exercise. And then the level up to that is sports physiology, because now we're talking about, we have very specific goals. With the boxers, we know we have this rule set. We've got 3-minute rounds. We have this amount of rest. We have this many rounds that they agree that it's potentially go for. And then obviously a number of criteria that is the end of the fight. Now with combat physiology, we have rules like the Geneva Convention, but beyond that, we can have police officers that spend their entire career and never once have to run after another human being or get into a physical altercation. And then we have other ones that get into, the worst situations of their life day one, or literally day, what would be 20 years minus one right before retirement. And so we have to have them ready for those types of actions at any given moment. So it lends to some really interesting situations because boxers, we know we've got this 1 to maybe 4 fights in a year that we're peaking for. But if you're a police officer or a firefighter, you're doing your job. You are, on the field once every 3 days. So how do we develop athleticism? How do we make sure that we're, keeping ourselves in a good maintenance program without having them trying to go into the field of fatigue state? And if we're working with our literal Army, military type personnel, like we've got deployment. So at least we've got more of a true in season and an off season to develop them. And I talk too much.
So some of them are like, like your special forces, they're in and out, in and out, in and out. So like so many different variables. I think that's why it's exciting. I don't know personally, but
Absolutely. I know I call myself a power lifter, but unfortunately I'm the call with mash. So we'll say I'm about 80% of mash and 90% of mash on my deadlift. That one I'm at least somewhat close. Squat,
what's your
it's more
best
like
deadlift?
Which era of MASH?
Yeah,
uh,
exactly. This area, you'll probably beat my ass.
well,
Dad era,
an old lion is still a
95%.
lion, and I did have a meet this past weekend, and I pulled 751 at a body weight of 207.
Dude,
So
that's
Damn.
impressive.
Yeah,
yes,
Very
that's
That's
impressive. Very
impressive.
impressive.
well,
Shit.
it turns out when you have a 6'4" wingspan and you're a 5'9.5" guy on a good day, deadlift is your friend.
Yeah, are you sumo or conventional?
Oh, conventional, the only way to pull.
Sweet. I'm doing an article right now about sumo versus conventional. Anyway,
Oh
Cute.
yeah. Well,
Cool.
and getting into anthropometrics and what's going to be optimal, and that kind of lends itself to the load carriage, which
Sure.
is
Yeah, I want to hear what is this load carriage thing.
yeah, so like, we all carry our emotional baggage everywhere. So I'm just trying to talk about like where we can shove it down so that way it's going to have the least amount of effect on our performance. But
This is the show that I needed to hear. All right.
with load carriage, we're really looking about, just the simple reality of the equipment you need to be wearing for your given athletic endeavor. So obviously, there's a big difference between what's your 40 time wearing your t-shirt shorts than it is in full football pads. And
Yeah,
obviously, not that they're having firefighters run a 40, but now we're talking about turnout gear. We're talking about our self-contained breathing apparatus, the SCBA units, the tools they have to carry, hoses, extra air. So some of those firefighters are literally running into buildings with, on the low end, 60 plus pounds attached to their body, and on the upper end can easily be over 100 pounds. And so, with that load carriage, we're not, now we're thinking about training our athletes. We're going to be training them not just energy system wise, but strength wise, so that they're going to be able to operate in that equipment effectively, and we're not going to be fatiguing out. And that's one of our current research endeavors we're doing over here, in that currently the standard test for Kentucky is what's known as POPS testing. POPS testing is a bench press, a push up, a sit up, a 300-meter run, and a 1.5-mile run that they have to pass certain criteria in order to go through. Now, this was initially implemented in the early 2000s, and this is before you've seen the addition of tactical vests, even more hand tools on police officers. So, yeah, the police officers that we remember from like the 90s of, essentially, they got the badge, they've got a gun, and a lot of them didn't even have tasers at that point. They had cuffs, and that's about it. They didn't have any near as much of equipment that they're carrying. So they're
Yeah.
still on very similar physical fitness standards they have to pass. But now it's equivalent of, okay, congratulations, you passed this. Now put on this 20-pound weight vest for every single activity you're going to do for the rest of your career in the field.
Yeah.
So
I've thought many times, especially on the police officer side of things, but they do have this like tactical vest on. Um, and most of them spend the entire day sitting. And then out of nowhere, one day you're going to have to get up and be at a 10 out of 10 when it comes to performance after you've been riding around in a car, sitting at a desk, filling out reports. It's a very different, the scale of their day to day can vary so much that being physically ready and to be able to produce that level of intensity when it's needed is a really tricky thing to train for.
absolutely. And, again, like we kind of brought up a bit earlier, you've got a great point of that straight up. You're going from 0 to 100. You've literally been sitting in a car for quite possibly hours at that point, and then you have to get out and sprint maximally. And I know just in my early 40s, I am hesitant to just get up and sprint in general, much less into a situation that obviously could require some type of force on force. And, we are contextualizing this with obviously the immense respect for anybody that's willing to take up this profession and
yeah,
be
no
put into
doubt.
situations that you have to make incredibly tough decisions in a very short period of time that hindsight, yeah, can tell us what was best, but unfortunately, we're dealing with those limitations. So how do we make sure that they have the mobility? They've got the
Yeah.
general overall strength we can talk about hip mobility. We can talk about low backs getting tight from just having that compression. We can talk about having the sheer work capacity of having the aerobic fitness to be able to, get up and recover in case the situation It doesn't resolve itself very quickly. And then it's my bad joke back in the day, whenever I would be around students that would, they pick up CrossFit and then be kind of like, what's your Fran time every 5 seconds? And I would tell them like,
Yeah.
hey, you pick the exercises. We're going to do three things. I pick the second exercise. The second exercise is going to be deadlifting 600 pounds for one. I'll give you a 1 year head start. And so, and that's getting into its issue with the firefighting testing, and that they're part of it. I really do like their test with the CPAT. No, that's with the military. My apologies. I'll fix the right acronym at some point. But they have a dummy drag, and that dummy drag is usually about 175 odd pounds, higher or lower in different areas. But we have been in public and realized that the average American is much heavier, like myself,
Much.
175 pounds. So if the person can only drag a 100 or a 205-pound dummy, well, this dummy might as well be glued to the floor because he's not going to be able to be moved. So again, making sure they have the strength and the conditioning to do that with the external load on top of them with firefighting gear. They're already doing that as part of their testing, which hence I really like that specificity. But how we do that with the policemen and women to making sure that, yeah, they can do these physical tasks, and what's a task that we can have them do it everywhere. So that way, that's why the old school Army standard of push-ups, sit-ups, and a run, you don't need specialized equipment. It's super simple. And whereas now that I really like the deadlift being added, the plank can obviously be a challenge because how do we make sure that subjectively we're doing that correctly?
Right.
And same thing with the, lift, carry, drag, slide, like, at least it's something that we can homogenize and compare from one side to another.
Things are starting to trend in the direction, in the proper direction, I think. So.
Yeah, I actually wanted to hear your opinion on the new test. So that's what, like 3 years old now, 4 years old, maybe more. It's obviously a massive improvement. I think the old one was like it was pull-ups, push-ups, basically,
And a run.
and like a mile and a half run or something like that, right? And now there's actually some strength and throwing elements in it. Am I correct?
Yeah. So it's an overhead medicine ball throw for distance. And yes, it's a 3 RM on the trap bar deadlift. And I think the max there is 345. And just so we're clear for Coach Mash, that's two-handed, not one. So we know it's really easy for you.
Yeah.
The plank, the idea is that they hold a good streamline. And what I like is they switch the push-ups over to hand release. So it's straight up chest to the floor, touch the hands out wide, bring them back in, do your next rep.
I have less variance than the push-ups. They're so hard to judge that whole, are they the lockouts too, man? I used to watch a lot of it's like people are doing you're doing 3 inches, man. They're calling that anyway, but
hey,
at least they're going all the way down. I like the hand release personally.
3 inches is more than enough, Mash. Okay. Anything after that is bragging.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I'm referring to pin pull deadlifts. I don't know what you guys are thinking about. But
because it's a lie. If it's not pin pull deadlifts, it's a lie. So anyway.
With the realities of that, and that's the problem. So a great example at our university where, Dr. Perry and I are working with this ROTC, their cadre, literally their current leader, I will leave his name out just out of respect, but the gentleman is an animal. He's a ranger. He's now in charge of the regiment here. He literally leads the runs, maxes the deadlift, maxes every single score as a guy who's turning 40 in a month. And the only thing he doesn't max is the overhead ball throw because relative to his stature, he's about a 5'9", 5'10" guy, but he's got somewhat short arms. So he just has a heck of a time creating that lever, having that longer arm to throw the ball, but at least we've got something that's a power indicator. Now, of course, the vertical jump has its flaws because, well, we've all worked with general population and seen vertical jumping abilities and can leave a little bit to be desired on occasion.
Yeah.
Again, how do you get something to scale up for literally, think of the U.S. military, how many hundreds of thousands of people do we have involved in that? So, as much as I'm sure Just Jump Met or some other company would love to be the official provider of the vertical jump testing apparatus, medicine ball and literally a measuring tape, and you can do it.
So it's like they throw it behind them as far as they can, or throwing it overhead.
The old school Russian
granny toss over.
Yeah.
Right.
Looking at that triple extension.
Yeah.
I would even say, go. Sorry, Doug.
was gonna say, what's the general structure of how you're training these guys? If they have no idea when they're going to perform or even what the test, so to speak, really is going to be, they don't know if they're going to put in a 12-hour shift where they're going to be in some crazy situation where they're just got to go all day and all night. September 11th is probably the most extreme example here. You don't know that you're going to have to get all your gear and just run up and down like huge flights of stairs, and then you got in basically an endless project of cleanup afterward. Like, you don't know when that's coming. And most of the time you're just riding around your cruiser or doing kind of low intensity activities. And then one day, as we've been saying, like all of a sudden you have an immense amount to do and you can't be fatigued. So how do you structure training where you can have enough stimulus for improvement, but not so much stimulus that if that very day, right after training, maybe you're gonna have to go into many hours of physical exertion already fatigued from the training session you just had.
Yeah. And, this harkens back to our conversation before we recorded. So it's a combination of EPO, growth hormone test, and then just enough DMAA to get you through the workouts. No, but
this guy knows how to perform. I like
yes.
it.
Yeah. Can I have all of that? Anyway, just kidding.
I just wish I could wake up with anyways. I am more jealous of your lifting. That is what I will say since it's being recorded. But at the end of the day, this is where trying to take advantage of cadet training as much to the extent as you had, because that is for sure the last real preseason, technical off season that you're going to have for those professionals. So during that period of time, really trying to develop, and it's very similar I like the approach of obviously what we all do at Rapid, where we're trying to figure out like what are the biggest issues. And a lot of these folks, the issues that they had previously when we started working with the DOCJT, that's the police training center, is some of the folks coming from like the Eastern Kentucky components during their training, they're making half of their hourly wage, and they would be getting paid during training about $4 to $5 an hour. Now, of course, those wages have gone up a little bit, but the sheer thing is calories. They can't afford really enough food to sustain themselves.
Wait, explain that a little bit more. What now? Like when they were like that's what they were getting paid as police officers
in some of the smaller towns in Eastern Kentucky. And mind you, this was at this point over 5 years ago, and I know the wages have come up some. Some of those police officers, while on patrol, are making anywhere from $12 to $14 an hour.
No way. Wow.
And you wonder why it's hard to find people that want to fill those positions. So one of the real challenges, we can have a great training program, but if all they can afford is bologna on hand, you're not going to get a great response. And then, of course, how many of them also have got really bad relationships with sleep? And that's what Dr. Perry and I have been working on, trying to figure out what are going to be the first interventions we're trying to do to help improve that. Now, obviously, on the training side, that's the nice thing about they come in and they do their testing immediately. So they have to prove that they at least are able to pass their the POPs testing by the end of it. So from there, okay, how far off is that 1.5 mile time? How far off is that 300-meter? If, for example, Coach Mash and I were going to do it, the bench press would not be the problem. It's that 1.5 mile run. So congratulations, you and I are going to be living that zone 2, zone 5 lifestyle to help build that aerobic base.
I've been living it.
I mean,
we're talking about that earlier. Yeah. So, yeah.
But, so hence trying to build up whatever those, weaknesses are and the most glaring ones. And that tends to help things, as well as looking on that recovery side of what's their nutrition look like, what's their sleep look like. It seems like a number of them believe the only thing you can hydrate with is White Monster. So we are trying to introduce this thing called water and trying to, making sure they're doing that. But they do a good job of now making sure they get water bottles and they're hydrating throughout the day, doing mobility work, because they used to have a rash of a lot of issues with hamstring strains. The issue they have now is they have a lot of issues with both, I wouldn't call it a stress fracture, but stress reactions in the lower leg, as well as plantar fasciitis, because these guys are wearing the same pair of shoes for years. So, and you guys know as well as I do, like a good pair of shoes is expensive. So
that's the question I had. What shoes do they wear? Are they wearing like this, like dress type shoes, or what are they wearing?
In their training, it's a wide variety of them. Some of them just have got, they stole their dad's New Balances, and that's a joke, just so we're clear. I'm not saying these police officers are stealing. And, some of them are wearing like Hokas. Actually, I saw a gentleman when we had the testing this past week, he was wearing the actual like bear foot shoe, like the ones that
Oh,
were popularized by the gentleman from Kabuki Strength. And he's
oh
about to
yeah,
go
yeah.
run the mile and a half on that in the 300 meter. And I'm like,
Mm.
okay, man,
Uh,
like obviously you can be a barefoot athlete and be, capable, but that one, obviously he's been doing this for a while, so I don't think he's going to have an issue. But you have the other folks that, there may be people like me, they like to lift weights, but they don't do much conditioning, especially not much impact conditioning with like running. And so those
Yeah.
tissues are just completely unduly
yeah.
developed. So we need to make sure that footwear is optimized, as well as then, what's the surfaces we can go on and train from there. But, to keep going with Doug's really great question, which is, okay, now let's look at their schedule. So if you've got a officer, you've got a firefighter that knows they're essentially on a 24 on, 24 off. Okay, well, that's more for the fire schedule. Then we
Yeah.
probably want to have them train and kind of more of an in season, like we're just hitting the low end of the Prilipin volume is just kind of a benchmark. Have them do
Right.
that right when they get off shift. So that way, they've got the next 24 hours to recover before they again are back out there. And have had conversations with people like Matt Wenning and other folks, and I like his approach to where if we're going to do lower body training, it is that literally right before we leave. Now, you can probably do a little bit of
Hmm.
upper body training while you're on shift. And again, we're going to make sure that we control the volume. We're not trying to push ourselves too much. And then that way, because, when they're trying to deadlift that large person, that so they're awkwardly like in between their toilet and their shower, like, or their tub, like how do we pick them up without straining our back? And now we're hurt, and now someone needs to do overtime, and we're on workman's comp, and it just becomes a greater burden for that department in general. And then obviously, costs in general for their budget when you have an injured individual. Now with the police, you can see that shift work type situation of them going from those, day shift, second, third shifts. If they're working with a precinct that's going to be consistent, and so they know again when those are going to be, let's try to program that lower body training to be in their zone 5, the real hard stuff, right before they're going to have a bit more time off. They're going to have that 24-48. Whereas, upper body or just lighter total body, I really tend to think of it, if we're going to go from the sports world, excuse me as my voice cracks. I'm 41 and I'm still going through puberty. I hope it one day to be as big and strong as Coach Mash. But we, will go and, treat them like an in-season athlete, where it's like we can't really push fitness too much. Or what we do is we think of it like a specialization routine of where we're going with just the maintenance volume for strength and for the lower and upper body. And then we're going to increase their conditioning a little bit. So we will add a little bit more of that zone 5 work, perhaps trying to add in just some more general zone 2 work throughout the week, because we know that's not going to be too hard to recover from. And of course, the nice thing is you get a lot of these officers that are also doing things like jujitsu. Like, they're actually getting in a pretty decent amount of conditioning, that has its natural little bit of strength that's being addressed. So we probably just need to do a little bit more global strength, aka your meat and potatoes of your squats, and to a lesser extent, deadlifts, of making sure that systemically we're strong. And then, of course, you get somebody in there that's incredibly strong and incredibly fit, but they can't touch their toes unless, you tie a 200-pound barbell to their hands. Then, yeah, then maybe we do incorporate a lot of that mobility work, and that can be that down regulation at the end of the day, because it's a stressful job. And, then and you see how, again, it sounds a lot like, a lighter version of the rapid stuff, because now we're talking about breath work, which obviously a lot of that area is built on. And I thoroughly suggest everybody here, if they get a chance, they're interested in this world, a great way to start looking at it. And this is from the outside in, or somebody like me from Exercise Phys, is look at Dave Grossman's work with On Combat. And he does a great job of just going through the fight or flight response, and how when you go through these incredibly stressful events in your life, you're not going to go home and just turn it off. What are you going to do to help yourself down regulate, help yourself relax? And um, it would be remiss of me not to bring up that the very real situation of, there is a bit of a cliche in that first responder world, is that those folks retire and then they die of a heart attack 5 years later, because it's that chronic stress throughout their entire profession. So what are we doing, obviously, nutritionally to address this? What are we doing sleep-wise to address this? And what are we doing, training, and specifically more probably the conditioning cardiovascular training to address this? Because if you're going to go through and you're going to be someone that was to serve and protect, running into burning buildings, for your entire career. It doesn't make me feel good to think that person only gets 5 years, or 10 years afterwards to enjoy that pension.
I know that's rough.
If you're going to add that to
Yeah.
society, I want to
I
see you
think
on a beach in Florida at some point.
I think we need to do a better job as a industry of like making the breathing thing, like helping people understand that it's not like frou-frou or that it's scientific. Yeah, I'm talking about myself. For the longest time, I thought, what do I thought breath work was so silly and cliche, and until what's the lady who sent us the book, and we had her on the big thick blue book, and I started reading that.
Body by breath.
Yes, and so and then of
Yeah.
course
Joe
Kelly
Miller.
Starrett,
Joe Miller.
and anyway, and I started reading it and practicing it. It's a definite game changer, as far as not only stress but like helping your CO2 tolerance. There's so many. We just need to do a better job of helping people understand it's not just some yoga, silliness. Not that yoga's silly. Time out. But you know what I mean.
So just because I want to dogpile here for a second, at the end of the day, I like to think of fitness really boiling down to essentially 3 points, which is you've got a strength side for long-term health, you've got a conditioning cardiovascular side, and then you have a mobility side. And obviously, for good overall health, you need all three. And of course, that's where, we all came up in that era of, be really strong and like that's all you need. Or,
Yeah,
be that long distance runner. So you got conditioning, but again, you couldn't squat to parallel even though you weigh 110 pounds because everything's just too tight. And then, of
right.
course, we've always had, not the always, but you've seen the rise of yoga and that becoming, you got the yogis that are like, oh, they have such great core stability. I'm like, I'd like to see them under 405. We'll see how stable that core is. So
Noodle. Yeah,
exactly. Like you need all three legs for that table to stay up. If you've only
you
got
do.
two, it's not balanced. You're going to have yourself some
Right.
issues. And what's some of the really cool conversations that I've been lucky enough to have with the trainers over at the DOCJT is they, a lot of them came up in the era of where it was deterrence. Like if you're a big jack dude, people just kind of assume it's probably not worth trying you just because you're a big jack dude. But I've done enough jujitsu read getting thrown by small people to know that it isn't obviously just about being a large person. It's about obviously exactly having skill and having that conditioning to go behind it. And so, that's what they're trying to address is making sure that we have this holistically developed individual, because obviously, Doug can speak at length to if you get somebody that's big and tight, like that's like, oh, let's go. Because you can put them in bad positions really quickly and they can't try to wiggle out of it. Those ankles are too tight. Congratulations. I've got nothing but angry levers to pull on. And, same thing, like I don't want to get in any physical altercations ever again in my life, but the person that gasses out in 10 seconds, like that's great. You just got to wait them out, and at the same time, I have been punched by people that are not very strong. And it turns out, if you can't bench an empty barbell, you're probably not gonna be able to punch me hard enough that it's going to really register. Again, not trying to block punches with my face. So again, how do we holistically develop these individuals
Right.
so that there is no weak point? And the best SWAT guys are now, just like you guys have seen in the special forces, they are not, Captain America. Like they are physically capable and they're in incredible condition. But, a lot of those really incredibly capable operators and otherwise, yeah, they're like, that's an in-shape guy. But you wouldn't look at him and be like, oh, that dude can bench press 500 pounds. Or, that dude obviously can run a marathon in 2.5 hours. They just have that great, just general base of fitness.
Yes.
So it's like they're ready for the unknown and unknowable. It's like they've been training to be prepared for a wide variety.
I've heard this before.
But would you add one more caveat to that? I would add like stress management in there as well, because let's say that you're super strong, super mobile, and you have great endurance, but you can't handle stress. And so you're going into a fight and your breathing is out of control, even though you have great cardiovascular, you're still gas out because you become so sympathetic. It starts dominating so too quickly. And so I've seen it with so many of my athletes who are incredible, who are getting ready to go into competition and, things complete or out the door. So it had nothing to do with the three. It just happened to do with their ability to, take on this what's in front of them.
Great.
Thoughts?
So to contextualize my pyramid of mediocrity, that's just to live a long life. That's not to be able to really necessarily do really cool things. Because obviously you can just be really freaking strong and do really cool things. Now, what you're bringing up is that's the question where, don't get me wrong, my goal in life is to be right more than I am wrong, and I hope I'm doing it. At the same time, now I think we're getting into two interesting, and there's going to be more variables there, but I like to think of it in basically breaking down to two. How many people are just psychologically the type of person that can survive buds, that can survive ranger selection, that can survive
Right.
delta? Like, it requires a type of person with a type of psychology that is not a very normal person. And this is more in awe of that type of person than anything else. And I joke with my students, like if they just had, and I know they have like the version of this that you can sign up for, but if they're like, hey, you can go try buds, like we'll just let you do it on the sidelines to be like, this is what an average guy gets through. Like, I just want to know how many minutes I can make it through there. And to be like, because those human beings are not just incredibly physically strong, but they have a psychological toughness. And then that harkens itself to, is this a type of toughness that is innate? This is a type of psychological resilience that is genetic in origin? Or is this something that effectively it's nurtured? It is built to a certain point. Is this something that people need to go through a crucible? Why is it that it seems like there's slightly per capita individuals, more spec ops people that come from Texas? Is growing up in Texas just really makes you want to kill somebody? I'm being very sarcastic when I say that. I'm being very sarcastic. However, I do have a joke if you guys are comfortable with me making fun of Ohio.
None of
Get
us
after
are
it. Let's hear
Ohio.
it.
Yeah.
Did you
I'm
guys
good
know
with
that
Ohio.
per capita, there are more astronauts that come from the state of Ohio than any other state in the US?
I didn't see that on my bingo card. I
Do you know
didn't.
why that is?
I don't.
Because
I'm
if you
ready.
grew up in Ohio, you'd want to get off this planet too.
Hey.
My wife's family's
Ba-doom.
from Ohio,
There.
so this will be another reason why we don't get along at Christmas.
He's
But
using that Thanksgiving that joke on. He's
warming up,
using
guys, just
Practicing
us
with
warming up.
for his warm up here.
Yeah.
I got a
So,
bunch of Ohio guys. I'm gonna have to tell them that.
oh, I mean, that's where Westside Barbell is. So, I mean, I've had to
Exactly.
run from my life in that place more than once.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, more to the form with that, I think that's a great point, Coach, which is stress inoculation is great. The more that we can get people exposed, that's why they do simunition. And did Dr. Perry tell you guys about the first time we got to watch them do a simunition pullovers,
I
simulated
don't know what you're
pullovers?
talking about. Simunition.
So what it is, it's essentially their normal guns, and in that bullet jacket is essentially a paintball, but it is a gun, and
Mhm.
you see the muzzle flash, you see the cartridge eject, and there is a projectile going at you. So he and I are wearing like these helmets. So like if
Holy
it hits us in the
shit.
face, it's going to be like getting hit with a even more high velocity paintball. Like it's going to sting. And
Mhm.
I'll always remember it. And we got to see this simulated pullover where they run different scenarios. And it's when you see it and you see an actual firearm being turned and pointed at another human being, that's when you see these people freak out. And it was first, availability heuristics is a dangerous way to do statistics because you can base it off of that small sample size of what you see and make extrapolations. But the small sample size of what Chris and I saw, the individuals that were in better physical condition seem to have handled that stress far better. And this is literally with one of their trainers coming out of the car and firing, in one of the examples, a literal AR at them. Another is they
Mhm.
walk up on the car and the person literally leans out and starts shooting at them from
Oh
inside the
shit.
car. Yeah. Another
Yeah.
one is the person's just being an absolute douchebag and trying to get them to do something. So that's just more about de-escalation. And the other one that was the force was essentially the person was trying to do a simulated, if we have to bleep this out, bleep it out, but suicide by cop. So like
Mm.
one of those, and then at a certain point they turn the pistol and face it at the cop, and they got to go and they got to make choices.
Yes.
And one of the cops, one of the cadets, because they're still going through training, and this is probably the first time they're going through this, and they're not even told like, here's your scenarios. They're just like, yeah, you're going to be up there for this number of times, have fun. So literally the guy comes out, firing. I literally see the cop hunch down behind the car doing this blind fire stuff, shouting,
Hmm.
"I will effing kill you."
Yeah.
And he
Hmm.
freaked out. He lost his, he got scared. And guys, any of us, if we're scared, um, yes, to that extent, we're going to make poor decisions. That's just sympathetic,
Yeah.
beyond psychological arousal. You are not good at regulating. And that's
Hmm.
just the horrible situations that these individuals can be put in, hence why it's so important. They are trained to an incredibly high level and held to a
Hmm.
high standard. And when he's going through the debrief, like literally, Chris and I just saw this because, like, I'm not going to lie, he and I are both like turning sideways and like, dear God, like, because he's just blind firing, and I don't want to get winged by anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
The other instructor, so there's one that's like just watching and giving them feedback. There's the one that obviously, was the um criminal in that version.
Yeah.
Goes to debrief him. He's like, okay, first off, if anything happens, you do not yell, "I will effing kill you." To which that officer goes, "I didn't say that. I didn't say that at all. I said stop." And like, no, nobody. You
Uh-huh.
definitely said that a number of times. And it's not that, he's trying to lie, because I mean, we all just observed it. It's just
He
he
lost his
was
mind.
exactly
Wow.
that high
Yeah.
level of psychological arousal. Like at that point, I am like, in my mind, I'm like, I wish we had a heart rate monitor strapped onto that guy. I wish we had a freaking blood draw of his epinephrine. Like,
Hmm.
where is all that sitting at? Because understandable, really high stress situation.
Didn't even know what the words that came out of his mouth.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah, there
So,
needs to be more study, in my opinion, in that world, and more time spent. Like, let me give you two examples. Like, there's one guy I coached who I knew he's just different. Like, he wrestled at Penn State. He was unbelievable year, and like, I could just, I've never coached anyone like him before. I don't think I'll ever will again. He's just different. He could do whatever you asked. He never complained. He just did it. You said, I need you to sleep this long. Whatever you said, he did. No problem, right? And I saw him one time. We're in this room, and there's another guy, also ex athlete, and they're arguing. And the one guy that he's arguing with is a 300-pound lineman who's going to NC State. So he's going to NC State on scholarship to play football. And this young guy is going to wrestle, I mean, little, like maybe 125, small, to Penn State to wrestle. And they're arguing. And that young kid, that young small boy, was never even panicked or never
mm.
even excited. He was just listening to the guy yelling at him. And then the big football player smacked him. And he just looks at me as if for me to give him a thumbs up. I'm like, I gave him the thumbs up.
Yeah.
And he beat that big boy up so quickly. Like, he took
Yeah.
him down like a tree and got on top of him, hit him like 5 times. And I said, stop. And he stopped. He's like, he never got mad the entire time.
Uh-huh.
And the football player is laying there bleeding. He's looking at me, and I was like, you should have slapped him, like. But and then, so my point being, that same kid goes on now. He's in Delta Force, and he's just killing it. So I got him ready to go, and he's just unbelievable. Meanwhile, example two, there was a guy I played football with Appalachian State. It was, I mean, obviously he's a good athlete. We're there together, and he's strong, and he's pretty good. But he was also kind of a clown. Matt got in a lot of trouble, would be late. And that same kid went on and changed. So, like, it definitely was not the same. So it was like they were not, this kid did not have that killer instinct, but nurtured it and eventually went on to also be in the Delta Force. And right as we speak, is about to be promoted to as a general, not, what is it, the first general, brigadier, whatever.
Mhm.
And so, and became a Delta Force, that other one. So the one was just born. He was Delta Force from birth. And the other one was nurtured Delta Force. But like, it would be cool to see more time spent on what causes that shit. And like, I know we do, obviously that field's out there, but I still feel it's still in its infancy because just now, it is, with weightlifters, we get it a little bit, and and they work with us a little bit. But I'm convinced that is the biggest key. When it comes to elite athletes, that final 10 elite guys, the only difference is the brain. Those final two, it's all brain. But yet we spend so much less time working on that. But anyway,
No, I could not agree with you more because it's easy to quantify height. It's easy
yes,
to quantify, certain things like your 40-yard dash
power,
time.
jumping, strength, all that stuff. Yes.
But how does one quantify will? How does one
Yes.
quantify vigor?
I don't know.
And then, yeah, it's like, yeah, is there a crucible you need to have? So like maybe he had never been challenged and then he went there and he finally had a challenge and he rose to it. Because we all know people that have folded like paper. Like the first time they came up against a real opposition, they no longer had the advantage of size. Like, oh God, you guys remember those guys that hit puberty when they were 12? And they were just absolute monsters in whatever sport. And then by, sophomore, junior year of high school, everyone else caught up.
Yeah.
And not only did they lose the lead, but they lost the will because they're like, well, and I'm just a regular guy. And, it's.
Yeah.
But
well, I watched that kid fall. I watched him like get challenged and fail miserably. And, he didn't do great at App State at all. And like I even watched him get into two different altercations, possibly one with me, and like he didn't do well at all. And like now, is no chance in hell I would want to get an altercation with this guy. Like like he's killed people. His Delta Force, and like how did he change that his brain? And like we've been friends forever. One day though, I wanted to sit down with him over scotch and be like, what changed you? How did you change? Because he was a great athlete. We're all great athletes. We were strong and fast and like the best of our class wherever we went to school. But he wasn't not that good. And mentally it was like last place. Now he's first place. He's about to be darn general. And so like, how did he do that? Is my question.
well,
And that's
you mentioned mentioning simulations earlier. This will be a fun story for people that are longtime listeners of the show. So, Mike Bledsoe, the original host of Barbell Shrugged before Anish took over around 6 years ago. This was like 2010 or so. We were in San Diego hanging out with a couple of Navy SEALs. We're getting ready to leave. We're at these guys' house/apartment, and Bledsoe takes a shower, comes out of the shower. I'm sitting on the couch with a guy named Brian, and there's a 9mm on the table. Bledsoe comes out of the shower and is just fucking with us, like kind of lifts his towel up to like show his ass to his buddies that were visiting, just fucking around. And then his Navy SEAL buddy grabs the 9mm off the table and fucking just shoots him with the simunition right in his ass.
Shoot with a what?
The simunitions, like what he was talking about earlier, like it's a real 9mm Beretta, but it has paintball rounds in a real gun. Right?
Oh
and so he just grabs it off the table and fucking shoots him right in the ass. Like on his bare ass too, which probably fucking hurt like hell.
They scream.
Yeah. Oh, it probably hurt a lot. And then he got his clothes on and took off. And those guys in that world, that was like totally fine.
Normal
no big
life.
deal. Easy money.
Should have mooned me. Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah.
It's amazing how relative that I don't know if I'll call it hazing, but just exactly. You're around those groups, it's like, yeah, let's just roll. Like, if any of you guys were like, I want to wrestle, I'd be like, okay, calm down. We've maybe drank a little too much. Like that's not going to happen. But other cultures, like, yeah, this is what you do. It's like, hey, you want to box? Like, let's just throw the gloves on. Let's just see what happens. Like,
I'm telling you,
different type of person.
Where I grew up in the mountains, it was just the culture. We just fought a lot all the time. It's just it's the Appalachians. It's not even mean. It's what you do.
How much did you single-handedly decrease the bear population there?
Well, funny you say that, but I have a great grandfather. There's a statue of him because he was historically this great bear hunter, and like there's a statue of him as we speak in my hometown for killing bears, but not me, him. But like. And there's stories of this guy, Wilburn Waters. You can Google it. And like the dude, there's a story. Supposedly he fell asleep in his deer stand, And then when he woke up, there was a bear in the stand with him. and he killed it with his bare hand. He had grabbed his knife and killed the bear. So like, it's just mountain folk. It's just like it's just what you do.
Mountain life's different, man.
It is totally different. It's like it's what you do.
There's nobody out there to save you. It's too far away.
No,
Just let you
man.
fend for yourself.
Yes, there's nobody coming to help you. No.
Dr. Lane, thanks for coming to hang out with us, man. Where can the people find you?
So on social media, I know I've got an Instagram that I honestly don't do a great job of updating. I should probably do that. Obviously,
Nah,
I've got
you're
a
good.
face for radio, so I try to keep my face off it as much as possible, and I try to use it as a way to help kind of teach. And then on occasionally, I'll have videos of me lifting. It's usually something deadlifting because I'm just less mediocre at that than the other ones. And of course, anyone that's interested at the program here at Eastern Kentucky University, they can look me up. And then obviously, I'm lucky enough to get a chance to work with you guys over at Rapid. So we get to help people be better at punching people in the face and other
So much fun.
approaches in life. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And
man,
other goals.
exactly. Combat
We got-
sports physiology is so much fun.
We got two beasts. We got one crazy who's really good. We got two beasts about to kill some people coming up. I'm excited.
Don't forget about the third there.
I know. I said he's good too. Like he's just crazy. If he's not so crazy, he's awesome. He's got to gather that. He's what we're talking about. He figures that whole. Then he's going to be a killer too.
Well, and that's what's fascinating to kind of go off on another segue is that he's very smart and he's very interested. And then it's kind of you guys have probably worked with those athletes where you're like, I wish you cared less and thought less about this because you're putting so much brain space into these components that it's probably becoming its own stressor because of kind of a hyperfixation than if it was just, you get the athlete that you just hand them the plan, like, okay, cool, coach, and they just do it. And, never a
I
second
wish
glance,
this guy
never a
would
second
do
question.
that. Well, that guy, he keeps second guessing and he doesn't do anything. He's like, I'm like, how about going to sleep, man? Try that. Step one. There's a thought. I love Zio though. Oh, wait. Never mind. Should have said that. Scratch that one. Anyway.
Travis Bash.
Matchlete.com. If you're local, obviously come see me at Rise Indoor Sports. So, or my email, obviously, if you want to read any of my articles, jimware.com. They got them all.
There you go. Douglas E. Larson.
You bet. I'm on Instagram, Douglas C. Larson. Mr. Mike Lane, thank you for being here, brother. Love having you here at Rapid, and I was stoked to have you on the show today. So I appreciate it, man.
Thank you guys so much for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure, and I've really enjoyed listening to you guys for, you guys over a decade now.
Oh, it's long.
Long time.
Very long. 2000 what? 11?
The very first episode of Shrug dropped the very
10 year
beginning
was
of
last year.
2012.
2012, yeah. 2 years ago, it's the 10 year. Shoo, 12 years. Every Wednesday in your ears. I'm Anders Varner at Anders Varner, and we are Barbell Shrugged at Barbell_Shrugged. And make sure you get over to rapidhealthreport.com. That's where you can learn about all the lab, lifestyle, performance testing, analysis, program design, coaching. And you can access that over at rapidhealthreport.com. Friends, we'll see you guys next week.